Also, we had a letter from a response from anti-atheists. I think that's how he's going to pronounce it. There's about 7 pronunciations. We call Wanda Auntie Wanda, uh, Aunt Wanda, but I think this guy is wanting it to be pronounced anti-atheist. And he says, I have only skimmed your series of videos. However, you seem unsurprisingly to be only considering Christianity and using the Bible as evidence. That's true. The Bible is my main evidence. That's true. As I was telling a young man a little bit earlier, another young man, I'm not addressing religion as a Buddhist or as a Muslim or as a Hindu. And so if I address religion from the standpoint of Christianity, that should be expected. Now, I also use scientific facts that I run across. I also use simple logic periodically, and you'll hear a lot of that in last week's lesson, which I think he skimmed over and missed because there were a number of things that I used. And this week's lesson is going to be the same way. We're going to use some things that are simply logic. You'll see it in Romans chapter 1, verse 20 and following, the logic that Paul uses, and it's irrefutable. Now, here's the point. If the Bible has a basic principle that's true, you can use the Bible to say it. Just like if Satan says something that's true, you can quote Satan. If a principle is true, it doesn't matter who says it. So anyway, he then uses this sentence, as early indoctrination is such an important component in God belief. In other words, in his mind, and I've seen a number of them, if you are not raised in a religious background, you are in America and you see all sorts of religious stuff, and thus you believe in God. And if that wasn't so, if that were not so, you would not be a religious fellow. He's incorrect. But even if he's correct, the fact is that complete teaching is what we strive for. He doesn't think so. I realize that. I've heard the atheist argument. But we strive for complete teaching, not incomplete. Complete teaching will take you to New Testament Christianity. Oh, that's just your opinion. Yeah, it's my opinion. And I'm advocating for him and anyone else. Strive for complete teaching, not indoctrination in one thing or another. Indoctrination has a negative connotation in it because it means that you're not thinking for yourself. There are a lot of people that are indoctrinated in various religions that come out of those religions. Sometimes they go into another false religion. Sometimes they go into atheism or agnosticism, but they come out of those things. And I'll give you some of those in our lesson today. Our lesson today is found in Romans 1, 21, 28, and 32. It has to do with the universality of the knowledge of Jehovah. God was known all over the world, all the way down through time. That's the point that I'm going to try to put across or to prove from the Bible. We take note that Jehovah has Romans 1:21 says, knowing God, they glorified him not as God. It declares they knew God. Verse 28, even as they refused to have God in their knowledge, they rejected the knowledge that they had. Verse 32, who, knowing the ordinance of God, the law of God, the will of God, the statutes of God, that they that practice such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but also consent with those that practice them. So we see these verses that God has indeed revealed his will, revealed what to do to be right with him, revealed who he is. And all the world knew that. That's the point. Jehovah has already repeatedly made himself known from the very beginning. Mankind knew his laws. The Jews were given a written law versus the Gentiles who had oral law. Plentiful is the evidence for the universality of the knowledge of Jehovah if you follow what the Bible says and then see what occurred in history. The first thing we would take notice is that when you take time from the beginning with Adam, and we know that Adam and Eve, the universality, they knew Jehovah. They were with him in the garden. But we're going to take it from there to 2,000 years and a little over to the days of Jacob. Here's what I want us to understand because of the longevity, the length of life that was given unto the patriarchs, Noah, Adam, Enoch, Seth. We can know this. This is important. The 2,000 years, the first part of man's history, took 5 generations. Today, to do the same thing, some would suggest it takes 40 generations. Now, remember, when I say 5 generations, I'm talking about overlapping generations. For instance, whenever you see the chart, and if it were easily to give it to you, I'd give it to you. You can go to the internet and you can find the chart, patriarchs longevity, and you can see what I'm saying. But what you're going to have is this. You're going to have at the top of the chart, I guess I need to go this way. You're going to have at the top of the chart, Adam. And he's going to have how many years he lived. And then you're going to have Seth. Seth is the son. You're going to see how many years. And you're going to go down through time. You're going to see Enoch. You're going to see he didn't live as long as the rest of them. You're going to come to the Methuselah. You're going to come to Noah. You're going to come to Shem. You know Shem. Shem is the son of Noah. And then you're going to come to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So from Adam down to Jacob, approximately 2,000 years, 5 generations. Adam knew Seth, his son. Hey, Seth, did you know we were created in a garden? And Seth told Methuselah. And Methuselah told Noah and Shem. And that was 1,500 years later. Hey, did you know we were created in the Garden of Eden? And so God told Noah to build an ark of gopher wood. He built an ark of gopher wood. He sent a flood. It flooded the whole earth. And so when he came out of the ark, he didn't have to say to Shem, we were just in a flood. Shem, though, had to tell others down who were born of his seed. And he was able to talk to Abraham's son's son, all of those, and tell them, hey, did you know we were created in the garden? And that there was a flood that destroyed the earth? Now, what we can do is this. It has been done in 1930s, a fellow by the name of Professor Woolley. All over the world, you have various mud stages. They call it something else. I'm going to call it mud. It's really, really, really thick mud stages. And it shows, according to the scientists, that there was a worldwide flood. That's that much of evidence. There's that much more. I'm not going to go into it. I'm just going to say that the longevity of the patriarchs would show that there was a worldwide knowledge of Jehovah God that created and caused the flood. All men knew of Jehovah doesn't mean all men followed Jehovah. Call to mind that Noah was a preacher of righteousness, 2 Peter 2:5. His voice was added to that of Enoch, who was a prophet of God, and they both warned of the flood. The name Methuselah means death to call upon. Methuselah died the year of the flood. Now here's what you have. You have Noah building an ark. This ark is gigantic. Find the biggest restaurant you know. Multiply it by 4. And that's how big the ark was. And it was in the middle of land. There wasn't any water. Hey, Noah, what are you doing? I'm building an ark. What's an ark? Well, it floats on water. There ain't no water, Noah. Yeah, I know, but there's going to be. Did you see what Noah's doing? He's building an ark to get on water. There ain't no water. Yeah, I know, he's an idiot. I do believe building an ark would sure spread. It is a huge billboard. And then when it started raining, Noah was right. Then there was universality of the knowledge of God, for sure. So we understand that you have Noah. We also understand that there was an event with Job, and he serves as further evidence that God was known upon the earth. In the book of Job, Job lived somewhere before Abraham. So we're talking about 2000, 2400 BC. That's the usual way of looking at it. Though Job's three friends were not accurate with their understanding of the doctrine of God, they knew who God was. They defended God as they understood, and they were monotheistic. They didn't defend the gods, they defended God. In Job chapter 40, verses 7 through 9, it was so. After Jehovah had spoken these words unto Job, he turned his attention to Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. My wrath is kindled against thee and against thy two friends, for ye have not spoken to me the right thing, as my servant Job hath. Eliphaz, Bildad, Zophar did according as Jehovah commanded them. And they taught Elihu, the young man, what he had to do to be right with God. And I would venture to say that they also taught everybody around them, no doubt. So you have the ages. You have, first of all, the patriarchal age. You have, second of all, the Mosaical age. We live under the Christian age. The Christian age began when Jesus Christ died on the cross of Calvary 50 days later on Pentecost, whenever the first full gospel sermon was preached. We adhere to the law of Christ. By the way, while I'm here, who on this earth doesn't know of Jesus Christ? Muslims know of him. It's in their book. Baptists know of him. Buddhists know of him, which is what I meant. Hindus know of him. Now you go back from the cross back to Mount Sinai, 1,500 years. Moses would give the law of Moses. The law of Moses was not before that. It was given to no one before that. It was given unto the Jews only. So God spoke to Moses, and Moses gave the Mosaical law. Under Christianity, God spoke through Christ through the apostles, and gave us Christianity, which is an international religion. The Mosaical law, and this is important for some atheists to understand, the Mosaical law was given to the Jews, only to the Jews. It was a national religion, patriarchal. What does patriarchal mean? Father. God spoke to the fathers, Job, Noah, Abraham, Enoch, Methuselah, spoke to the fathers and would give directions unto the family through the fathers. So it was a father rule in that particular time frame. So through the voice of Adam, Noah, Enoch, and who knows how many others, God is made known throughout the world, covering some 2,000 years, the knowledge of Jehovah God. Now we turn our attention to the second 2,000 years, and it begins basically with Joseph, which is a few years this side of 2000. We start with Genesis chapter 41, and we recognize through the influence of about 4 men and 2 women, for sure, we have the fact that God is known. We have the life of Joseph, 1750, the life of Moses, 1450, the life of King David and Solomon, 950 BC, and Daniel, the prophet of God, in 550. We also have Rahab and Esther. So we start with Genesis 41, and we recognize that in time, Joseph was sold into Egyptian bondage. He ended up being in prison. In prison, he interpreted the butler and the baker. And pretty soon, the butler is back, and the baker is back with Pharaoh. Pharaoh has a dream. He calls his wise men. Tell me the interpretation of my dream. We can't. But he had already interpreted the baker. The baker said, I know somebody who can. Joseph, he's in your prison. So he called him. and he talked with Joseph. Joseph said, here it is, 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. Prepare for the famine with the 7 years. And that's exactly what occurred. Now read with me Job 41:39. Remember that Pharaoh is the ruler over the world and became more so because of the famine. Pharaoh said, for as much as God has shown thee all of this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou. Thou shalt be over my house. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Looking at Exodus chapter 1, verse 8. Almost 3 centuries later, we read, now there arose a new king over Egypt who knew not Joseph. Now the proclamation, the clear statement is, there arose a Pharaoh, there arose a king who knew not Joseph. It implies others did. For 300 years, from the time of the famine and the getting over that famine, they knew Joseph, they knew the God of Joseph. But here now, this particular ruler did not know. He didn't want to. So we take notice, they know Joseph. We now turn our attention to 1450 because that's the time in which there arose a ruler that knew not Joseph. And he oppressed and suppressed and made servants out of the children of God, the children of Israel. So in Exodus chapter 5, 1 through 3, Pharaoh expresses this lack of knowledge before Moses. It says, and Moses and Aaron came and said unto Pharaoh, thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel. If you're reading the King James and maybe some other versions, when you see the word Jehovah, you don't see the word Jehovah. You see the word Lord, and it's all capitalized, L-O-R-D, all capitalized. On the other hand, you have the word Lord, also L capital O-R-D, not capitalized, and that's Adonai. You may also have other lords, but you need to separate those two because in the King James, the all caps letter Lord means Jehovah, which you have in the American Standard. I'll tell you a little story. Oh, I appreciate that. I'll tell you a little story. A number of years and decades ago, we were in Ringling, Oklahoma. Wanda was so young, she doesn't even remember it now. And I use the American Standard, and it uses the word Jehovah in it. King James doesn't. There was one of the members there after 2 months. She said, our new preacher is a Jehovah's Witness because he says Jehovah all the time. No, I just read Jehovah in the Old Testament all the time. I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. Nobody's a Jehovah's Witness. What'd you say? So, thus saith Jehovah, the God of Israel. Look at verse 2. And Pharaoh said, who is Jehovah? Shouldn't have done that. He didn't know. It was his own reasoning. He had a whole nation right outside in the land of Goshen that knew who Jehovah was and had known for over 300 years, and yet he didn't know. It was a self-imposed ignorance that I should hearken unto him. And they said, the God of the Hebrews. And so in Exodus chapter 9, 13 through 16, Jehovah said unto Moses, stand before Pharaoh and say, thus saith Jehovah, the God of the Hebrews. Let my people go that they may serve me, for I will this time send all of thy plagues upon thy heart, upon thy servants, upon thy people, that thou mayest know that there is none like me in all the earth. You will know Jehovah. But in very deed, for this cause have I made thee to stand, to show thee my power, that my name may be declared throughout the world. I did the very thing that I'm doing. I allowed you to be brought up ignorant of me, not having the knowledge of me, Romans 9, that we looked at this morning. I allowed you to do this, and the reason I did it is so I could make my name known through a wicked man who has a wicked heart like you do. I didn't make it that way. You made it that way. And so now I'm going to make my power known throughout the world. God did not leave people in ignorance. They knew. So after Pharaoh's death, Exodus chapter 15, verse 1 and following, the children of Israel, after the Red Sea, would sing this song. Pharaoh's chariots and his host hath he cast into the sea. Verse 5, the depths cover them. They went deep into the depths like a stone. Verse 11, who is like unto thee, O Jehovah, among the gods? Who is like unto thee, glorious in the holiness, fearful in praises and doing wonders? Verse 14, the peoples have heard, they tremble. Chains have taken on hold of the inhabitants of the Philistine. 15, the Edomites, the Moabites, the Canaanites, their hearts are melted away. So 40 years later, because of the sinfulness of the children of Israel wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, we are now in Joshua 2, verse 9 through 11. The children of Israel are going to go into Jericho. They're going to destroy Jericho. Ahab says unto the spies, I know that Jehovah hath given you the land. Rahab knew Jehovah. How? She tells us. And that the fear of you is fallen upon us, all of us, and all the inhabitants of the land melt before you. For we have heard how Jehovah dried up the water of the Red Sea 40 years earlier when you came out of Egypt. Verse 11, and as soon as we heard it, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more spirit in any man because of you. For Jehovah your God, he is God in heaven and on the earth beneath. 1450, 1400 BC, even today, unbelievers remember the Red Sea. Cecil B. DeMille? Do you know who that is? Cecil B. DeMille was one of the most known, famous producers in Hollywood, and he produced Charlton Heston, The Ten Commandments. In the middle of that show, you have the Red Sea. You may not have read the book, but you saw the film. You saw the movie. And there you saw the Red Sea. And you would ask yourself, did that really happen? And you ought to have gone and checked it out. Some of the folks didn't. However, we take notice that we have the knowledge of Jehovah universal. We then turn down to 950 BC, in the days of David and Solomon. Mankind is reminded of Jehovah yet again. Before David killed Goliath, the giant, David is a kid. The armor doesn't fit David. And he's going to go out against a 10-foot giant. And at the battlefront, verse 45 of 1 Samuel 17, then said David to the Philistine, thou comest to me with a sword, with a spear, with a javelin. I come to thee in the name of Jehovah of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defiled. This day will Jehovah deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. What God? Jehovah, that can take one kid and wipe out your champion, your best soldier. Solomon dedicated the temple. 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 54 through 60. We're looking at verse 59. And there he said this, let these my words wherewith I have made supplication before Jehovah be nigh unto Jehovah our God night and day, that he maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people. Verse 60. That all the peoples of the earth may know that Jehovah, he is God. There is none else. Turning to 2 Chronicles 9:18, the queen of Sheba heard of Solomon, his wisdom, and all that was in Israel. She said, that can't be. I'm going to go look. Verse 5, 2 Chronicles 9. She said to the king, it was a true report that I heard in my own land of thine acts, of thy wisdom. Howbeit, I believe not their words until I came. Mine eyes have seen it. And behold, the half of the greatness of thy wisdom was not told me. Thou exceedest the fame that I heard. Verse 8, blessed be Jehovah thy God. God was known through David. God was known through Solomon. God was known through Israel all over the world. We now go down 400 years from that time frame, and we come to 550 approximately BC with the situation with Daniel. Now, right here, you'd like to go through the whole book of Daniel verse by verse. It took us a year to do that a couple of years ago. So we're not going to do that this time. But after Daniel had interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the coming kingdoms, which came true distinctly, details. After Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been cast into the furnace of fire, after the prophecy of Daniel concerning the continuation of the kingdom of Babylon without its king Nebuchadnezzar. What great courage. Nebuchadnezzar, I hate to say it, and don't take my head off for it, but you're going to get goofy in about here a little while. And for 7 times, we think it's 7 years, we don't know. But for a while, you're going to not rule your kingdom. But when you come to yourself, guess what? The kingdom's still going to be here. You're now going to be king, and you're going to continue to rule. He was out in his garden, and he was saying, look at what you did, Nebuchadnezzar. You are magnificent. He's now crazy. Lets his hair grow. Lets his fingernails grow. Goes out in the trees. Birds out there. After 7 times, he comes to himself. We're now reading. When Nebuchadnezzar returned to his throne, he wrote a letter to his kingdom. Here's what he said. This letter is 2,500 years old. It's in the book. Nebuchadnezzar the king, Daniel 4:1, unto all the peoples, nations, languages that dwell in all the earth. Peace be multiplied unto you. It hath seemed good unto me to show the signs and wonders that the Most High God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. They in Babylon knew Jehovah. Thus, all of the world knew, because he was king over the world. 70 years later, the queen of Babylon, who was the queen of the king, who was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, they were having a party, Daniel 5. Now the queen, Daniel 5:10, said, verse 11, there's a man in thy kingdom, let Daniel be called. Verse 13, then Daniel brought in before the king. The king spake and said unto Daniel, thou art that Daniel, who art the children of the captivity of Judah, whom the king, my father, brought out of Judah. 16, I have heard of thee. Yes, you have. Yes, you have. That thou canst give interpretations and dissolve doubts. Yeah, but you're a wicked fellow, Belshazzar. And tonight, your kingdom will fall. And that night, the Persians, the Medes, marched against a fortified, unbreakable city, but it broke because God said, tonight, while the party's going on one end of Babylon, the city of Babylon, was a party. In the middle of Babylon was a party. In parts of Babylon, fights were going on. And the king of Babylon was losing his kingdom. And Daniel predicted that. The king knew Daniel, that he was an interpreter of dreams. We could also tell of Esther, queen of the world, 480 BC. She was the queen to Xerxes. We do have a feast today that goes back to 480 BC. It's called the Feast of Purim, that the Jews partake of and have partaken of for 2,500 years, give or take. The Feast of Purim said, you can destroy the Jews, and they better not do anything about it. Esther says, I plead for my people. Her husband said, okay, they can protect themselves. And so the Jews formulated the Feast of Purim, which they practice even today. The governor Nehemiah in 444 BC was the cupbearer to the king of the world, Artaxerxes, and he told him of Jehovah. So we have the first 2,000 years. We've looked at the next 2,000 years. Here's a question. What about verses that suggest the world did not know God? Though God was made known unto the world refused to avail itself of the information. That's not new. In Noah's day, 8 people entered the ark, but all knew of the ark and what it was about, and Jehovah that was going to bring the destruction. Pharaoh serves as a great example of a nation learning about God, but failing to benefit from that knowledge. He lost his firstborn son because of it. Israel in 800 BC, we have Hosea, the prophet of God, saying this concerning the children of Israel. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Listen to the next phrase. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will reject thee. The fact is, rejection, 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 rejection. People reject God. They hear, they know. They can even know more, but they reject God. Unbelief is not a phenomenon solely for our generation. The Muslim world, the Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, Catholicism fight against Jehovah and against Jesus and or against the Bible. They violently push them away. They purposely chain them from the hearts of men. Multitudes of those reared under these religions have escaped such religions, but then when they escape, they turn to other false religions or they turn unto atheism. New Testament Christianity is still abundantly available to all. It's in the New Testament. The New Testament is the #1 seller over the world and has been for over 100 years. Well, Ron, give me a reason to inform myself completely in New Testament Christianity. You have no hope if you don't. He says, I don't care. Then why are you on the radio? Why are you on the internet? Why are you debating? Why are you writing articles? Why are you doing everything you're doing in order to fight against Jehovah, the God of the universe? Why are you doing that if you don't care? It seems like you may care just a little bit. I don't like what you're doing. So I'm going to try to disprove you. Why? You can't help the person with a set, ignorant mindset. They, like thousands before them, need to seek the proof, not build a barrier against the evidence. Strangely, this is the charge that they make against all of us. They become guilty of their own charge. You will not look over the evidence. You reject the evidence. No. You reject the evidence and you're projecting your guilt upon us, is what you're doing. I would suggest if you would leave the books to the side just for a little while and honestly, thoroughly seek what the Bible says about Jehovah. You'll be surprised at what you really find out are the facts. The Bible would teach men that whenever they believe, they are to be baptized into Christ as penitent believers. We're always ready to help folks to do that.